Outliers, the story of success. Written by Malcolm Gladwell and published in 2008. What if everything we thought we knew about success was wrong? Imagine two young men, equally intelligent, equally ambitious. One rises to the top of his field, while the other struggles to make ends meet. Why does this happen? Is it luck? Hard work? Genius? The book challenges the traditional narrative of success, arguing that it isn't just about intelligence or effort but also about hidden advantages, timing, cultural background, and unexpected opportunities. The book sparked both admiration and debate, particularly over the now famous 10,000-hour rule, which suggests that mastery requires a significant amount of dedicated practice. Critics have debated whether Gladwell oversimplifies success, but his storytelling remains undeniably compelling. One of the book's most striking claims is, "The tallest oak in the forest is the tallest not just because it grew from the hardest acorn, but because no other trees blocked its sunlight, the soil around it was deep and rich, and no rabbit chewed through its bark as a sapling." This idea, that external forces shape individual success, is central to Outliers. Gladwell illustrates this through the stories of figures like Bill Gates, who had rare access to a computer as a teenager, and the Beatles, who honed their musical skills through relentless live performances in Hamburg. These stories, alongside research on cultural legacies, intelligence, and social structures, reveal that success is far more complex than we often assume. This material, compiled and presented by Dadson Education, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to literary analysis and education, will explore Outliers chapter by chapter. We will uncover the hidden patterns of success and rethink what it truly means to be an outlier in society. Chapter 1. The Matthew Effect, the rich get richer. If you were to examine the birthdates of Canada's top hockey players, you'd notice something strange. A disproportionate number of them are born in January, February, or March. At first, this seems like an odd coincidence, but as Malcolm Gladwell reveals in Outliers, it's the result of a hidden advantage that begins in childhood and snowballs over time. This phenomenon, known as the Matthew Effect, explains why early advantages, no matter how small, can shape a person's future in ways they may never realize. The reason behind this birthdate pattern lies in the age cutoffs for youth hockey leagues. In Canada, the eligibility cutoff for junior hockey is January 1st. A child born on January 2nd competes against children born as late as December 31st of the same year. At 6 or 7 years old, this nearly one-year gap in physical and cognitive development is significant. Older players tend to be bigger, stronger, and more coordinated, which makes them more likely to be noticed by coaches, selected for elite teams, and given better training opportunities. As these young athletes receive superior coaching, play in more competitive matches, and gain confidence, their skills improve at a faster rate than their younger peers. By the time they reach their teenage years, what started as a small advantage has turned into a massive head start. This is the essence of the Matthew Effect, a term Gladwell borrows from the biblical verse Matthew 25 verse 29. "For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath." In other words, those who begin with even the slightest edge, whether in sports, academics, or career opportunities, often accumulate more advantages over time, while those who start behind struggle to catch up. This principle extends far beyond hockey. In education, students placed in advanced reading groups in early childhood often receive more attention and higher quality instruction, leading to better academic performance later. In the workplace, individuals who get early career breaks tend to progress faster than equally talented peers who weren't given the same initial opportunities. Gladwell's analysis of the Matthew Effect challenges the common belief that success is solely the result of talent and hard work. Instead, he highlights how structural factors and seemingly arbitrary details, such as birthdate, can have lifelong consequences. Understanding these hidden patterns forces us to question traditional ideas of meritocracy and consider ways to create fairer systems that give more people a chance to succeed. Chapter 2. The 10,000-hour rule, mastery through relentless practice. What do the Beatles and Bill Gates have in common? At first glance, a rock band and a tech mogul couldn't be more different. Yet, according to Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers, their success wasn't just about talent or intelligence, it was about time. Both the Beatles and Gates had the rare opportunity to practice their craft for thousands of hours before they ever became famous. This relentless practice, Gladwell argues, is the true secret to mastery. Take the Beatles. Before they skyrocketed to fame, they spent years playing marathon sets in the nightclubs of Hamburg, Germany. Between 1960 and 1962, they performed live for up to 8 hours a night, 7 days a week, sometimes playing over 1,200 shows. This grueling schedule forced them to refine their skills, experiment with new styles, and develop the tight chemistry that later defined their sound. By the time they returned to England, they weren't just another band, they were seasoned performers with thousands of hours of live experience. Similarly, Bill Gates didn't just wake up one day and build Microsoft. As a teenager in the late 1960s, he had an incredibly rare advantage: access to a high-end computer terminal at his private school. While most kids his age had little exposure to computers, Gates spent thousands of hours programming, debugging, and refining his skills. By the time he co-founded Microsoft, he had already logged more hours coding than most of his peers would in a lifetime. These stories illustrate Gladwell's famous 10,000-hour rule, which suggests that to achieve world-class expertise in any field, one must practice intensely for at least 10,000 hours. This principle is backed by research from psychologist Anders Ericsson, who studied elite musicians, athletes, and professionals. The key takeaway? Natural talent alone isn't enough. What separates the great from the good is the sheer amount of deliberate practice they put in. This challenges the common belief that prodigies are born, not made. While innate ability plays a role, the real driver of success is consistent, structured effort over time. The world's best athletes, musicians, and innovators don't just have talent, they have put in thousands of hours refining their craft. Gladwell's 10,000-hour rule reshapes the way we think about success. It's not about luck, nor is it about raw genius. It's about time, effort, and opportunity. Those who reach the top aren't simply gifted, they've put in more hours than anyone else, often because of circumstances that allowed them to do so. This insight forces us to rethink how we define skill and achievement. If mastery is a matter of time and practice, how can we create more opportunities for people to put in their 10,000 hours? Chapter 3, The Trouble with Geniuses, Part 1, Beyond IQ. What if having the highest IQ in the room wasn't enough to guarantee success? Meet Chris Langan, a man with an IQ estimated to be between 195 and 210, far beyond that of Albert Einstein. With such extraordinary intelligence, Langan should have become a groundbreaking scientist, a world-renowned thinker, or a leader in his field. Instead, he spent much of his life working as a horse rancher, struggling to gain the recognition his intellect seemingly deserved. In Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell uses Langan's story to challenge the belief that intelligence alone determines success. Langan's genius was undeniable. By the time he was a teenager, he was effortlessly acing standardized tests and absorbing complex theories in mathematics and physics. But despite his remarkable intellectual abilities, his life was filled with setbacks. A scholarship to Reed College fell apart when his mother failed to sign a financial aid form. Later, at Montana State University, an issue with a scheduling conflict and an unsympathetic administrator led him to drop out. Langan lacked the ability to navigate the system, negotiate solutions, or advocate for himself, what psychologists call practical intelligence. Now, contrast Langan with J. Robert Oppenheimer, the brilliant physicist who led the Manhattan Project. Unlike Langan, Oppenheimer faced major obstacles, including a failed attempt to poison his tutor while studying at Cambridge. Yet, instead of being expelled or having his career derailed, he managed to talk his way out of serious punishment. He went on to become one of the most influential scientists of the 20th century. The key difference: social intelligence. While both men were extraordinarily smart, Oppenheimer knew how to influence people, navigate institutions, and seize opportunities. He had what psychologists call practical intelligence, the ability to read situations, communicate effectively, and advocate for himself. Langan, despite his unmatched IQ, lacked this crucial skill. Gladwell argues that once a person's intelligence reaches a certain threshold, around an IQ of 120, additional IQ points don't significantly impact success. Beyond that point, Other factors like social skills, cultural background, and access to opportunities play a far bigger role. Intelligence may open doors, but practical intelligence determines whether someone can walk through them. This challenges the traditional idea of meritocracy. If raw intellect alone doesn't guarantee success, then perhaps we should rethink how we nurture talent. Gladwell's insight forces us to consider, are we placing too much emphasis on intelligence tests and not enough on the social and cultural skills that truly shape a successful life? Chapter 4, The Trouble with Geniuses, Part 2, Social Intelligence Matters. Chris Langan could solve complex mathematical equations in his head, but when it came to navigating the real world, he was at a disadvantage. Despite his extraordinary intelligence, Langan struggled to assert himself in academic and professional settings. He lacked the ability to negotiate, advocate for himself, or navigate bureaucratic systems, and this, more than anything, kept him from reaching the heights his intellect should have afforded him. In Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell introduces the idea that success is not just about what you know, but how you interact with the world. This is where the concept of social intelligence comes in. Some people, like J. Robert Oppenheimer, instinctively understand how to use charm, persuasion, and confidence to get what they need. Others, like Langan, struggle with these unwritten rules of success. But where does this difference come from? Gladwell argues that a person's social intelligence is largely shaped by how they were raised. He introduces the concept of concerted cultivation, a parenting style common among wealthy and middle-class families. These parents actively teach their children to self-advocate, ask questions, negotiate, and engage with authority figures. From an early age, these children learn to challenge decisions, express their opinions, and navigate complex social situations, skills that prove invaluable in adulthood. By contrast, children from working-class backgrounds are often raised with a different approach, natural growth parenting. Instead of encouraging children to challenge authority, this style emphasizes obedience, independence, and self-sufficiency. While these values are not inherently bad, they often leave children unprepared for situations where speaking up, networking, or pushing for opportunities is essential. Langan, who grew up in a poor, unstable household, never developed these skills. He wasn't taught how to challenge unfair situations, communicate with authority figures, or seek out opportunities. When faced with obstacles in college, whether it was financial aid issues or a scheduling conflict, he accepted them as immovable barriers rather than problems to be solved. This inability to navigate social systems ultimately held him back more than his lack of resources ever did. Gladwell's takeaway is clear: intelligence alone is not enough. Success depends on the ability to communicate, negotiate, and advocate for oneself, skills that are often passed down through cultural and economic privilege. This insight forces us to ask, are we mistaking intelligence for success, when in reality, social intelligence is just as important? And more importantly, how can we ensure that everyone, regardless of background, is given the tools to succeed in a world that rewards confidence as much as competence? Chapter 5, The 3 Lessons of Joe Flom, The Power of Demographics and Timing. Success often seems like a matter of talent and perseverance, but what if it also depends on something completely out of our control, like when and where we're born? Malcolm Gladwell's story of Joe Flom, one of the most successful lawyers in modern history, reveals how timing, demographics, and overlooked opportunities play a crucial role in shaping success. Joe Flom was the son of Jewish immigrants who grew up in Depression-era New York. Despite his brilliance and work ethic, he faced a major obstacle. Elite law firms in the mid-20th century were dominated by wealthy, white, Protestant men who refused to hire Jewish lawyers. With no access to the prestigious firms, Flom and his colleagues had to build their own practice from the ground up, taking on cases that the top firms rejected, particularly corporate takeovers and hostile mergers. At the time, this area of law was considered low status, but in the 1970s and 1980s, corporate America changed. Mergers and acquisitions became a booming industry, and suddenly, the skills that Flom had spent decades perfecting were in high demand. The once overlooked legal work he had mastered turned him into one of the most sought-after lawyers in the world. His firm, Skadden, Ops, Slate, Mora and Flom, became a powerhouse in the legal world. Flom's story highlights 3 key lessons about success. 1. The importance of being in the right place at the right time. If Flom had been born a few decades earlier, he might never have had the chance to thrive. But he entered the legal profession just as corporate takeovers became a dominant force in business, allowing him to capitalize on a growing field that others had ignored. 2. The power of hardship and perseverance. The discrimination Flom faced initially forced him to take on unconventional work, but instead of seeing it as a setback, he turned it into an opportunity. Those who persist through difficult times often gain specialized skills that later become invaluable. 3. Cultural background shapes success. Flom's Jewish heritage played a key role in his rise. Many Jewish immigrants in New York had a legacy of working in highly skilled, independent trades, like garment making and tailoring. This background encouraged self-reliance, adaptability, and entrepreneurial thinking, qualities that proved essential when breaking into a profession that had shut him out. Flom's journey reinforces one of Gladwell's central arguments: success is never just about individual brilliance, it's about historical context, social structures, and the opportunities that arise from them. While hard work matters, factors like birth era, cultural background, and even discrimination can shape who gets ahead and who doesn't. Gladwell challenges us to reconsider how we define success. Instead of believing in the myth of the self-made man, we must ask, how much of success is really within our control? And how can we create a world where more people have access to the right opportunities at the right time? Chapter 6. Harlan, Kentucky, the legacy of cultural background. In the rugged mountains of 19th-century Kentucky, a deadly feud raged between two families, the Howards and the Turners. What began as a minor dispute escalated into a cycle of revenge killings that lasted for years. If someone insulted a member of the family, it wasn't just an argument, it was a call to arms. This wasn't unique to these two families. Across Appalachia, blood feuds between clans were common, and honor was something worth fighting, and even dying, for. At first glance, this may seem like a relic of the past, an extreme case of violence from an era long gone. But as Malcolm Gladwell reveals in Outliers, the cultural patterns that shaped these feuds did not disappear, they evolved and continue to influence behavior today. The people of Harlan, Kentucky, inherited a culture of honor, a deeply ingrained way of responding to threats and disputes, passed down from their ancestors. The culture of honor and its origins. The origins of this culture date back to the Scotch-Irish immigrants who settled in the American South. These were herding societies, where protecting one's property, livestock in particular, was crucial to survival. In contrast to farming communities, where cooperation was key, herders had to be constantly on guard, ready to defend what was theirs at all costs. A reputation for toughness and retaliation wasn't just about pride, it was a survival strategy. This mindset persisted across generations. Even long after livestock theft was no longer a daily threat, the tendency to react aggressively to perceived slights remained embedded in Southern and Appalachian culture. Studies show that even today, people from these regions are more likely to respond to insults with aggression than those from other parts of the U.S. Cultural legacies and success. But what does this have to do with success? Gladwell's point is that cultural background shapes behavior in ways we don't always recognize. The same culture of honor that fueled deadly feuds in the 1800s can still be seen today in the way people handle workplace conflict, negotiations, and social interactions. In professional settings, those raised in honor-based cultures may be more sensitive to disrespect, more prone to confrontation, or more likely to value loyalty over compromise. This idea extends beyond the South. Cultural legacies, whether they involve honor, deference to authority, or emphasis on independence, shape the way people interact, solve problems, and seize opportunities. Some of these inherited behaviors help individuals succeed in modern society, while others can be obstacles that must be consciously unlearned. The bigger picture. Gladwell's analysis forces us to rethink how much of our success is truly our own doing. We like to believe that we are entirely in control of our destinies, but our behaviors, decisions, and even how we handle conflict are deeply influenced by history. Understanding these cultural legacies allows us to see the hidden forces at play in our lives and, perhaps, to change the ones that no longer serve us. So the question becomes, how much of who we are is shaped by the past? And how can we recognize and reshape the cultural legacies that hold us back? Chapter 7: The Ethnic Theory of Plane Crashes, How Communication Affects Success. On a stormy night, Korean Air Flight 801 approached Guam's airport. The cockpit crew was tense, but the veteran captain remained in control. The first officer noticed the plane's altitude was too low, disaster was imminent. Instead of directly telling the captain to pull up, he hinted at the danger indirectly. Seconds later, the plane crashed into a hillside, killing most of the passengers on board. Malcolm Gladwell, in Outliers, argues that the root cause of the crash was not mechanical failure or bad weather, but communication, specifically, how cultural attitudes toward authority influenced the crew's interactions. Plane crashes often stem from miscommunication rather than a lack of skill or technical malfunctions. Aviation experts identified a troubling pattern: many crashes were caused by indirect communication rather than an absence of knowledge. Gladwell introduces the Power Distance Index, PDI, which measures how much a culture respects hierarchy and authority. In high PDI cultures, such as South Korea and Colombia, subordinates often hesitate to challenge authority figures directly. This tendency becomes dangerous in the cockpit, where clear and assertive communication can mean the difference between life and death. During the 1980s and 1990s, Korean Air had one of the worst safety records in the airline industry. Investigations revealed that in many crashes, co-pilots and flight engineers recognized problems but were too afraid to contradict the captain. Instead of issuing direct warnings, they used vague, indirect language that failed to convey urgency. For instance, rather than saying, "Captain, we are about to hit the mountain," a first officer might say, "The weather is quite bad tonight." While such indirect speech might be socially appropriate, it proved disastrous in aviation. Recognizing that cultural communication styles were contributing to these accidents, Korean Air made significant changes. The airline required pilots and crew members to speak English in the cockpit, as English, the international language of aviation, encourages more direct speech. They also implemented training programs to teach crews how to challenge authority when necessary, fostering an environment where subordinates felt comfortable speaking up. Additionally, the airline worked to change its internal culture, teaching pilots to break free from ingrained social habits and prioritize safety over hierarchy. Within a few years, Korean Air transformed from one of the most accident-prone airlines into one of the safest in the world. Gladwell's insights extend beyond aviation. The case of Korean Air highlights a broader truth: success is not just about individual talent but also about how effectively people communicate and work together. Whether in business, medicine, or education, cultural legacies shape how people interact with authority, take initiative, and express concerns. This raises an important question: how many failures, whether in the workplace, in schools, or in personal life, occur simply because people are afraid to speak up? If success depends on breaking free from cultural barriers, then improvement may rely not just on skill or intelligence but on the ability to challenge outdated social norms. Chapter 8: Rice Paddies and Math Tests, Hard Work and Cultural Mindsets. Why do students from some countries consistently outperform others in math? Is it because of natural ability, or could there be a deeper, cultural explanation? Malcolm Gladwell argues in Outliers that success in mathematics and in many other areas is deeply rooted in the traditions and values passed down through generations. And surprisingly, one of the strongest predictors of math success can be traced back to rice farming. The connection between rice farming and persistence. For centuries, rice paddies have been the backbone of many Asian economies, especially in China, Japan, and Korea. Unlike wheat or corn farming in the West, rice cultivation requires intensive, year-round labor. Farmers must carefully manage water levels, transplant seedlings by hand, and maintain their fields daily. This kind of work isn't just physically demanding, it requires patience, precision, and relentless effort. Gladwell points out a key difference between Western and Asian farming traditions. Western farmers, wheat, corn, and barley growers, relied on seasonal cycles. They worked hard during planting and harvesting seasons but had long, idle winters. This meant success was often influenced by external factors, like weather conditions. Asian rice farmers worked every single day. Their success wasn't dictated by luck or the seasons but by how much effort they put in. The more they worked, the better their crops would grow. This cultural mindset that hard work leads directly to success became deeply ingrained and passed down through generations. Over time, this work ethic extended beyond agriculture and into areas like business, education, and, most notably, mathematics. Why Asian students excel in math? Math is a subject that rewards persistence and effort. Unlike subjects that require memorization, mastering mathematics is about practice and problem solving. Gladwell argues that the same cultural values that made rice farming successful, patience, diligence, and an unshakable belief in effort, also make students better at math. This is why studies have found that students from Asian countries tend to spend more time working through math problems than their Western counterparts. They don't give up as quickly when faced with a difficult problem because their cultural heritage has instilled in them the idea that hard work leads to mastery. Contrast this with the Western approach, where many students believe that math ability is something you're either born with or not. In cultures shaped by rice farming, the belief is different. If you struggle with math, you just need to work harder. Language and learning, why counting systems matter. Gladwell also highlights another fascinating reason why Asian students might have an advantage in math language. The way numbers are structured in many Asian languages makes them easier to learn and work with. For example, in English, we say 11 and 12, which don't directly relate to their numerical value. But in Chinese, numbers follow a more logical pattern. 11 is 10-1, 12 is 10-2, 34 is 3-10-4. This logical structure makes mental math easier and faster for young children learning arithmetic. Studies show that Chinese-speaking children learn to count earlier and can solve simple addition problems more quickly than English-speaking children. The bigger picture, cultural legacy and success. What does all this mean? Gladwell's key takeaway is that success in any field isn't just about raw talent, it's about cultural habits, historical traditions, and deeply embedded ways of thinking. If an entire society believes that effort leads to success, that belief gets passed down through generations. And in the case of math, the persistence developed through centuries of rice farming has given some cultures a built-in advantage. This raises an important question. If cultural habits shape success so powerfully, how can we reshape our own attitudes toward learning and effort? Perhaps the secret to success isn't just intelligence, it's the willingness to keep working when others give up. Chapter 9, Morita's Bargain, Opportunity Changes Everything. Imagine being a hard-working, intelligent child, but knowing that where you're born and the school you attend could determine your future before you even have a chance to prove yourself. This was the reality for Morita, a young girl from the Bronx whose life was transformed by an opportunity that most children in her neighborhood would never receive. Morita was accepted into KIPP Academy, a rigorous charter school designed to help underprivileged students succeed at levels typically only seen in wealthier schools. At KIPP, students followed a strict schedule, long school days, extended homework hours, and summer classes. It was exhausting, but it worked. By middle school, KIPP students were outperforming kids from the best suburban schools in the country. Why did KIPP work? Malcolm Gladwell argues that KIPP's success is proof of a larger truth. Success is not just about intelligence, it's about effort, discipline, and access to the right opportunities. Here's why KIPP was so effective. 1. More time to learn. KIPP students spent 60% more time in school than their peers in traditional public schools. This extra time helped them absorb difficult concepts, develop strong work habits, and keep learning during the summer, a crucial factor, since summer learning loss disproportionately affects low-income students. 2. High expectations and structured support. KIPP didn't just teach math and reading, it taught students how to work hard and persevere. The school demanded discipline, but it also provided a support system that made students believe they could achieve great things. 3. A culture that values effort over natural talent. Many students from privileged backgrounds grow up in homes where they're encouraged to ask questions, get tutoring, and see education as a long-term investment. For students like Morita, school had always been about survival. KIPP changed that by reinforcing the idea that hard work plus opportunity equals success. Morita's Bargain, a life-altering trade. But success at KIPP came with a cost. Morita sacrificed much of her childhood waking up at 5:45 a.m., spending 10-hour days at school, then going home to complete 3 or 4 hours of homework. She barely had time for friends or relaxation. This is what Gladwell calls Marita's bargain, the trade-off she had to make in order to escape the cycle of poverty and reach the kind of success that wealthier kids take for granted. Marita's story forces us to ask a difficult question: why should children from disadvantaged backgrounds have to work so much harder just to get the same opportunities as wealthier kids? The bigger picture: systemic change is needed. Marita's experience shows that talent isn't what holds most children back, lack of opportunity is. The success of Kip proves that with the right environment, any child can excel, regardless of background. But does that mean every underprivileged child should have to sacrifice their childhood just to have a shot at success? Gladwell argues that if we truly want to level the playing field, we need systemic change. Rethink the school calendar. The current system, with long summer breaks, benefits wealthy students who have access to enrichment programs, while lower-income students fall behind. Schools should consider extended learning time for all students. Emphasize effort over innate ability. Just as Kip instills discipline and perseverance, all schools should create a culture where hard work is rewarded as much as natural intelligence. Increase access to quality education. No child should have to rely on luck to get into a good school. Every child deserves access to a high-quality education, no matter their zip code. Final thought: the power of opportunity. Marita didn't have more natural talent than other kids, she simply got an opportunity that most children in her position never receive. Outliers shows us that success is never just about individual effort, it's about the systems that either create or block opportunities. So, the real question is, how many potential outliers never get their chance because the system isn't designed to help them succeed? And more importantly, how can we change that? Conclusion: rethinking the myth of the self-made person. We love the idea of the self-made success story, the genius who rises from nothing, the hard-working individual who beats the odds through sheer talent and determination. But Outliers challenges this myth. Success is never just about personal effort. It's shaped by history, culture, environment, and access to opportunity. Malcolm Gladwell's exploration of outliers, from hockey players and tech moguls to pilots and students, reveals a deeper truth. Privilege is often invisible to those who have it, and struggle is unavoidable for those without it. The child born in the right month gets ahead in sports. The student who receives structured opportunities excels in academics. The entrepreneur with early exposure to technology dominates an industry. But what happens to the millions of talented people who never get those breaks? Rethinking how we define success. Understanding the real factors behind success forces us to rethink our assumptions. Instead of asking, why are some people so successful, we should ask, what advantages help them succeed? Instead of assuming intelligence or talent determines success, we must recognize the power of timing, cultural legacy, and social structure. Instead of blaming individuals for their failures, we should look at how society can create more opportunities for those who don't naturally have them. A call to action: creating a more equitable society. If we want to build a world where success is truly based on merit, we need to level the playing field. That means reforming education so that every child, regardless of background, has access to the resources and time they need to succeed. Rethinking workplace structures to promote diversity, mentorship, and opportunity for those who might not have traditional advantages. Challenging cultural norms that prioritize individual success stories while ignoring the systemic barriers that prevent others from thriving. Gladwell's message is clear: success is not just about individual greatness, it's about opportunity, preparation, and the systems that shape our lives. If we truly believe in fairness, we must acknowledge these hidden forces and work to create a society where more people have the chance to succeed. Because real success isn't just about making it on your own, it's about making sure others can, too. This content was brought to you by Dadson Education, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to providing insightful literary discussions. If you found this material thought-provoking, make sure to stay connected for more compelling stories. Pass this along to others who appreciate gripping narratives, and let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.